Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Your host, Derek Champagne, is the founder and CEO of The Artist Evolution, a full-service agency building successful brands, marketing tools, and campaigns, and also the author of the best-selling book, Don't Buy a Duck. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Dr. Andy Garrett is our guest today. He's a friend. He is a leader. He's making an impact on his world in a big way, an impact in leadership world as well. He's got a doctorate in clinical psychology, extensive studies in life coaching and consultancy, and he's actually at the forefront of revolutionary movement towards personal growth. You've seen him. He's been covered with affiliates for NBC, for CBS, and then, of course, in articles in his category as well. And he's now fully dedicated his life and work to creating the greatest positive impact that he can as he looks to his children and the world they will inherit. In light of this, he's convinced that creating and establishing authenticity at the largest scale possible is the greatest contribution that he can offer. In an effort to reach as many people as possible, how to experience exactly such a radical transformation, he's also developed a signature online digital master course, Your Complete Blueprint to Establish an Authentic Growth Mindset. And in addition, Dr. Andy has learned many of these lessons from his grandfather, Carl Karcher, who was a successful entrepreneur and actually the founder of the Carl's Jr. household brand. Dr. Andy, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, Derek, I am so excited to be here, and I know this is an extension of some conversations and really powerful discussions that we've been having, and so I'm just really excited to have this opportunity. If I can pause for a moment just to say, as the topic of discussion is going to be on authenticity, that as I even looked through and kind of went through some of your previous interviews, and I was looking through some of the reviews that people left, it was really amazing to see people having the same experience of you that I know that I've had, where you really create such a safe, secure space for people to come in and explore their thoughts and kind of expand. And I really think that from having previous discussions with you comes from kind of you being such an authentic person and having such clarity on your values. So I find this really particularly meaningful and special because of that. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And I can't take all the credit for that because I've learned from really good leaders like guys that we both know, like Aaron Walker, who we call Big A, who showed me that not only is it okay, but it's a better place when you come from an authentic place, and put some of your ego aside, to learn from others so that you can better help them and learn from them. So thank you for that, though.
Absolutely.
Hey, let's jump in. I want to talk with you about, first of all, we always want to understand where our guests came from. We want to know you as a person. So take me through. I mean, you can do kind of a fast forward highlight reel where pretend we're watching a movie and it goes into the kind of the past and tells us who Dr. Andy is. Kind of give us a little bit of highlight about you, just some highlights from your life so that we can get to understand you better. And then what chose you to go down the path that you have as far as helping others in the career that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am here in Orange County, Newport Beach, and I only say that because I have not ventured very far. I've been born and raised here, and one of the things that you'll, I think, see throughout this conversation, and something that is very important to me, is family values. And so all of my family is still within a few mile radius of where we live right now. And that is something that is very special and meaningful to me, and to have my kids be able to access, their grandparents and aunts and uncles. And growing up, I had the same experience. So, as a little kid, I actually, for a period of time, got a chance to live with my grandparents. And while I'm sure that was complete chaos for them, it was an incredibly special time and experience for me. And even when we moved out, we literally lived, it must have been 1.5 miles away from their house. And so, and grew up until about 6th grade, having that type of access. And my other grandparents, those my maternal and paternal grandparents, they lived within a few blocks of, my grandpa, Carl. So, family is just kind of a central organizing principle in who I am and what I do. But, I will say that life certainly was not always on a very clear path for me. I really had some struggles going through adolescence and young adulthood, where I just was filled with so much anger and sadness and had no idea who I was. And I look back now and I really see how, because of a lack of identity, the definition of what it meant to be successful was just really needing people's approval. And when that's your definition of success, I had no barometer for like making good decisions. It just, whatever I had to do. I literally remember the first day of high school, where I'd come from a really small school, and my high school had over 4,000 students in it. And I felt completely lost on the first day of lunch, where none of the people that I knew happened to have the same lunch period that I did. And I had to go up to a group of strangers and say, would you guys mind if I sit with you? And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I will never feel this way again. I will do whatever I have to do to fit in. And so that started a path where I became friends with a lot of people, but it was amazing. I'd be at parties and I'd be doing things and I'd still feel so alone. There was a sense of like feeling like at any point people would discover that I was fake, or, that it's amazing to be surrounded by people, but still feel really lonely. And that led to a path of just, making some really bad decisions up until I was about 21 years old, which is interesting because that's usually when people start making bad decisions. But
that's great.
I really made some significant life turns. And I look back, and even at that moment, even at 21, my grandpa was such a motivational and inspirational figure in my life. And he really served as kind of that father figure role, since, that was kind of missing in my life. And, it's amazing how much of an impact, and we grew so close over those next, 10 years, where we literally refer to each other as best friends. And I come from a huge family, I should say. My grandpa had 12 kids. And I think I have 50, I don't even know what the actual number is, but I think it's like 50 cousins.
Wow.
So when he'd call me best friend, it's politically not very correct, because the other answer would be like, come on, Dad, you can't say that. And the amazing thing, though, is being close with a lot of my cousins. My grandpa had this ability that, despite having 12 kids and all these grandkids, usually when you have a family that big, you have, people in the family that feel like they didn't get their share of attention. It's just really difficult to make everyone feel important when you have that big of a family.
Right.
But somehow the way he did it, and I kind of get it now looking back in retrospect, he had this amazing ability to single people out at family, gatherings. And I know if I asked any of my cousins now, do you feel like that you had a special relationship with Grandpa? That each and every one of them would say yes. And it's completely genuine and true. That was just he was so clear on how important family was to him, that he really was intentional. And you never got the sense when you were with him or talking with him that he had any ulterior motives. He just really cared. Like I never had talks with my grandpa about business. He was always asking me about my life, and he remembered all my friends' names. And it was really amazing to see how safe it felt to be around him. So,
you and I have talked about some stories. Would you be open to sharing a couple of the, because you talk about your family feeling close to him, but your grandpa knew presidents and dignitaries, and he was a powerful man, and he developed one of the most successful, restaurants, and he's it's a household brand. But you've told me stories about how kind he was and gentle and made other people feel important at times when they needed it too.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about that. And I will say it historically has been uncomfortable for me. Not, uncomfortable is the wrong word, but to talk about my grandpa, just because it's a personal, kind of relationship. Right. And I never wanted to ever leverage that relationship in any way. Right. But it's interesting, now looking at my kids and thinking about, kind of the future generation, and really feeling like I want to do everything I can to leave, the world in a better place for them. And I look back at my grandpa and think of how he helped to create a better world for me. And so I feel compelled and pulled really to really honor his legacy in the most tasteful way that I can. So I'm happy to share that, but I just wanted to, quickly acknowledge that. And
Well, you and I have known each other for a long time, and for the first while, you didn't mention it to me, and I was just helping you talk through some positioning and some things like that I do with clients and friends, and from a marketing and from a product development standpoint. And you're building this amazing, life-changing course right now. And, you didn't tell me for several months. I kind of had to drag it out of you about who your grandpa was. And just there's so many lessons and stories that tied back to it that, I can attest that it's not something that you've ever used as a calling card. You've been very appropriate. And in fact, you've not disclosed a whole lot about your personal relationship with your grandfather. So,
well, I appreciate that. And I do realize that if I'm creating a course on authenticity and really trying to position, how well I understand this, that not sharing this part of my life wouldn't be particularly authentic on my part. So, one of the things about my grandpa that was just crystal clear, and I was going through and reading back, he does have 2 biographies written about him. And I was kind of going over some of the notes the other day, and I've been actually reading the stories to my kids at night, which I'm sure is not exactly the children's stories they're looking for, but it's really fun for me to be able to share, the stories, because they didn't get a chance to meet him. Unfortunately, he passed away actually right before Abby and I got married. But he had such clarity on what was important to him, and he had an incredible amount of energy. The guy would get up at like 4:30 in the morning. And he would, I think, go to church daily. He would do his prayers. He would eat breakfast with the kids, go build one of the fastest growing, fast food restaurants in the nation. And then he'd make sure he got home every night to have dinner with his kids. And he just packed so much into the day. And not only that, but he was involved with a ton of charities and philanthropic causes and was very active socially. And I look back and think, man, how can I bottle up that energy? And there's a great quote that I ran across the other day from Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why, where he differentiates the difference between energy and charisma. And he says, energy is something you can get from a good night's sleep or a cup of coffee, but charisma is something that can only come from having absolute clarity and conviction in your purpose and why. And when you are able to articulate that and you have consistency with that purpose, that's where charisma, really comes from and has the power to inspire and lead. And I do love me a good cup of coffee. So I will say, if Starbucks ever comes up with a cup of charisma, I will definitely be drinking that. But I say that because I look back and that is why I think my grandpa had the energy that he did. He just was so clear on what mattered to him. And if you're familiar with the concept of flow, where really you're almost lose a sense of time because you're so engaged and you feel an incredible amount of energy. And it's like your most fulfilling work and you're really energized by what you're doing. I just think my grandpa spent most of his life in an experience of flow. I think the way he showed up as a husband, the way he showed up as a grandfather, I think he was energized by it because he knew how he wanted to show up. It mattered. It was very important to him. And I think he very much valued a process of perpetual growth. He was always looking to expand, not just his business, but obviously having 12 kids, he was always looking to expand. But so
I want to ask you I want to transition for a minute, and I want to go back and talk about this course and about your grandpa more too. But I think you're very successful in your practice. You work with a lot of high level leaders. You see them struggling with some things in my line of work and the things I do with our our mastermind groups that you and I are both a part of, and I've been able to see people that not only that maybe are they trying to figure out how they show up in the world and find purpose, but they also sometimes are even scared to look at their own self too deeply because they're going to see what's really there. They're afraid of that word authenticity, or they don't even understand how to look for it. I think it's an extremely powerful word. I think it's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, in how you show up in the world. But take me through for a few minutes, because you and I have talked extensively about this. Why it's important to you, why you chose this line. I know for your family, but you've seen firsthand that how lives have been wrecked and also how lives have been transformed at a high level for leaders who are embracing this concept.
Yeah, that's such a true and compelling statement. And, I do get a chance to work with a lot of families, and I really work with amazing families that I feel so lucky to spend time with, that they trust me. But one of the things that I see is that the families that come in, as I work with the husbands and fathers, they often are very successful. They're at the top of their industry, and they're experiencing incredible success from a financial standpoint, occupational standpoint. But obviously the reason why they often end up in my office is they're not experiencing that same level of success at home. In fact, they're experiencing a lot of failure. And what I often see happens is, when they're not getting kind of the reinforcement at home, they tend to go one of two paths, at least, again, the people that I work with, is that they either double down on kind of the mindset of that CEO or the, kind of leader, and trying to implement that at home and kind of force that, which creates a bigger wedge and gap between them and their kids.
Yeah, that doesn't work. I've been there.
Or they check out. It's like, hey, I get reinforced, I'm held on a pedestal at work, but at home, it's like, I'm getting all kinds of negative reinforcement. So it certainly makes sense. Go spend the time where you're feeling most effective and successful. And so because they've been so successful, and here I am kind of trying to enter in and saying, hey, let's reevaluate. Let's take a look at what your core values are that are really driving your behavior. And let's make sure that there's consistency with them and how that's showing up at home. And they're often very reluctant to go down that path because they don't want, it's like, I don't want to affect what's working so well for me at work. And I get that. But as they go through the process, what's been crystal clear is they develop, authenticity has this notion of like consistency. And when you show up with the same set of values and you see that your decisions are lined up with that, it's amazing how that clarifies and simplifies everything. You're almost one of the most immediate effects you get from clarifying your values and then doing some of the exercises that we do to implement those on a daily basis is your stress levels go down substantially. And it's like all of a sudden, it's like putting on a new pair of glasses where you see things with such great clarity of what matters and what really doesn't. And these leaders end up finding that it's possible to have it all, that they can actually develop intimacy and closeness with their wives, that they can have closer relationships with their kids, which is deeply fulfilling for them on a level that, they hadn't experienced before. And they're also able to show up as even more effective leaders because people are actually inspired and following them as opposed to being ordered around and kind of managed. Now they're leading with more inspiration, more energy, more passion. And so it's amazing some of the transformations that I've seen and how, a lot of these guys, their parents modeled to them, that the dad was the breadwinner. And that's really, the main role in the stuff that came to relationships and all that. That was the role of the mom and the wife. But I think in today's society, there's more expected, right? There's more expected of myself to want to show up and be really active and present as it pertains to my family and my wife. And I know I've seen over and over again how powerful it is when they start to build these relationships and realize that they can create a whole new paradigm from their family going forward. So
I think that's critical, Dr. Andy. I think I mentioned this to you before, but the last mastermind event I went to, I had an Uber driver who I chatted up because I love to do that. I just think it's fun. My wife wonders why I always do that, but I learned so much each time. And he asked me out of nowhere, he said, Derek, because we were on a first name basis by then. And in fact, we missed our turn and drove for another 10 minutes the wrong direction because we were so engrossed in our conversation. But he said, Derek, what did your grandfather leave you? And he caught me off guard. And I just said, I'm not sure. Let me think about that. He said, then he left you nothing. He said, I can share with you what my grandfather left me.
Wow.
And so, in that transition, here you are, he made a big impact on you. And I don't want to say that my grandparent left me nothing, but
sure.
Just when I look at going, what opportunity do I have to leave a legacy and to write? It's easy for me to just go and work. I'm good at that part of it. I build companies. That's what I do. I can do that all day long. That's my safe zone. That it's for me, it personally is a cop out to say that I'm just going to go build in my company because that's where I belong, because that's the easy part for me. And for me, I had to learn. The other part was learned for me. It was tougher for me after a busy day to sit there and then go, okay, now I'm going to invest equally. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but that's the truth, is I'm going to invest equally the same, if not more, love and attention into growing my family intentionally. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. They hate to admit it, but it's tough. And so here you are, your grandpa's taught you these values. I want to talk more about this authentic growth blueprint, because I think it's a game changer. I mean, if it's important to you, this is a step-by-step plan to access the best version of you, your life, your best relationships, how to find purpose and use your greatest strengths to do your best work and to make an impact that only the authentic you can. And it comes from the lessons you've learned in private practice setting with these successful entrepreneurs, with watching families and how they interact, from life lessons you've received from your grandfather, and who taught you how to live with authenticity, how to value relationships in a way that are completely transformative. Let's talk more about what you can expect in this authentic growth blueprint. Like, give us some highlights, high level of what it looks like for someone to go through this and what kind of transformation can happen with them.
Yeah. And I will obviously love this question and appreciate you sharing what you did with the Uber driver. That's a great story. And what you get, I really almost kind of hesitated to use the word authentic. It was interesting as I was really trying to put my, kind of finger on what exactly is it that people are going to get out of this process? Because I'd been doing it in my private practice, right? Doing the core values and the way that we integrate core values and help people to, internalize them and implement them in every area of their life is the most powerful leverage point that I've ever come across. You see results very quickly. Mm-hmm. And then, I'd been using from some of my understanding of positive psychology, kind of things with intrinsic motivation. And that's really just saying, with authenticity, it's not about living a life of what other people expect of you. It's not about, I know you had a phenomenal interview that I listened to, and I'm going to totally butcher his last name, but the doctor who I think got his last rights read to him 5 times, Feigenbaum.
Yes. Yeah, Dr. Feigenbaum.
Amazing story. And he talked a little bit about, kind of really not living with regret, as he was living in overtime. And that really stuck with me. And it reminded me of the article from hospice care workers, where they kind of collected all these, kind of years of working with people that were dying. And the number one regret that people expressed over many years was that they didn't live a life true to themselves. They ended up living how they thought other people expected of them. And that's a lot of what this course is I want to save people from, is to make sure that you are living a life where you're really doing, this is my belief, is that we all have a unique set of gifts and strengths. And there's a special purpose that our life is supposed to teach us, that we're supposed to use those gifts and strengths to really create the biggest impact, positive impact that we can, wherever that might be. If that's, just in your family, to do the best work there, that's amazing. If it's to do it on a larger scale, but we all have a unique purpose, not what I would call an authentic purpose. And when we are aligned with that, and we're doing that, not only are we going to feel completely energized and we're going to have the most fulfilling, gratifying, amazing life, but that's how we really change your trajectory of where this world's going. Because there's, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's, from a psychological well-being standpoint, there's some really concerning, evidence that things are going in a scary direction. We're seeing depression rates at all-times high, and it's depression starting at an increasingly younger and younger age. We're seeing suicide rates at all-times high. I mean, we're really, and it looks like, that is not going to stop anytime soon. And so that's why when I look at my kids and I say, what can I do to change the tide of where this is going? I really, really believe that authenticity is the key, to get kids to understand how to build self-worth that comes from within. I think trying to find your purpose or your definition of success from anything outside of yourself sets up a very, very dangerous kind of pattern. Because what happens, let's say, and I see this all the time in my office, is the definition of success is social status, or maybe it's success. So you get it, you reach a certain level of income or net worth or whatever it might be, And, as you reach these markers, you get a nice hit of dopamine, right? Which feels good.
Right.
But because it comes from outside of you, that means that you have to keep then you're craving it again, and you have to do more and more work to get that same hit of dopamine that you originally got. And it's essentially the same exact cycle that sets up an addictive cycle. So you become almost addicted to needing something outside of yourself to feel good. And that really, when you are not successful and you're not hitting those markers, the feeling of awfulness that sets in is really, really painful and debilitating. And so if we can flip that around and say, well, hey, what if you could feel good because you were, being driven by an internal sense, like an internal map or roadmap, blueprint, let's say, by what matters most to you. And your definition of success is about really, living a life of purpose. And so all of your markers and motivation is coming from inside of you, so that when you're in alignment with that, it's essentially like a clean energy, where it has no repercussions, has a ton of benefits, and you can renew it endlessly. And so teaching kids how to have self-worth, teaching parents really how to create a definition of success that's actually going to make you feel happy and fulfilled, and it's going to create a virtuous cycle, which the virtuous cycle, I didn't fully understand it until I started writing about it. But it's basically a feedback loop, right? Where, I start to feel good about myself, which then motivates me to do more work. And then I feel good because I'm being more productive. And so I start to do more good work, and it just continues to build up and up. And you can actually create this in a relationship dynamic, which I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but
this is very targeted. And, if I can jump in, a few things that stand out to me. One is I was like this for a little while. I thought, well, if I try to go into this feel good or self-help kind of category, it's going to marginalize my opportunity to be as successful as I can for my vision of hitting my absolute purpose with my drive and my resources. And, from a young age, I always felt that I want to conquer and do big things. And so there was a time in my life where I thought trying to do this is going to marginalize me, but it's quite the opposite. And I found that not giving attention to these areas was actually hindering me from being productive in other areas as well. And was poisonous for me. And I felt more loneliness. And the biggest thing that I felt, the number one word that eluded me, and I would tell my wife this, and I said I would trade anything if I could just find peace. And I couldn't find peace. I couldn't find that word, Dr. Andy. I looked for it. I couldn't find it. And people would say, well, you need to go to church. And I say, I am a person of faith. I prayed about peace this morning, and I don't know what else to do. You need to read the Bible. I did. You need to. And I was like, I'm trying these things. And when I finally started to unpack some of these areas and realize the balance, that's when it started to make a difference. And so, what would you trade to have peace and meaning in life? Beyond just what you're doing strictly in that high performance category?
Man, that is a powerful question. And I know for me personally, nothing. Authenticity is your pathway to real freedom. And right. It's amazing knowing someone's core values. So working with a lot of people that are in a position of hiring and owning a business, when you really understand, so the three major components of authenticity is, as I think I was starting to cover, I was hesitant to use that word because I feel it's so overused that it really has lost its meaning. And even as a clinical psychologist, before I really did a deep dive into understanding what true authenticity is, I don't know that I could have really told you. I heard people say things like follow your passion, find your voice. And I think both those things are great. But if you don't know what your passion is, you don't know what your voice is, and you don't really have good self-awareness, you don't know who you are, those, suggestions can actually do more harm because it makes you feel like something's wrong with you, if you don't know what those things are. And so I think I said, hey, let's take a few steps back and let's understand, how do you find those things? And, your core values really are the things that motivate and drive you. And if you understand someone else's core values, you understand your wife's, you understand your employees, you basically have an inside look at how to motivate them and how to really, right, when someone's in alignment, let's say freedom is their number one value, and you give them autonomy and you give them the ability to really, kind of to explore and have that, you are going to see them light up like you've never seen them before. And if you impinge or you start, they feel like their freedom is being threatened, you're going to see them start to react in a way. And if you don't know what your core values are, then you're going to have these reactions, but you're not going to understand why. Right? You're just going to feel like, hey, I know I'm off course, but I'm not exactly sure why, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to get back on course.
Right. You can't correct something that you don't understand how to dial it.
Yep. And so the core values piece, and then the intrinsic motivation, which is what I believe is really the foundation of follow your passion. It means, how do you show up to do the type of work that energizes you? There's those things that if you didn't have to worry about money, but you had to do some type of creative, output, or you had to contribute in some way, what would you do? And that's really trying to get out the passion, but also looking at intrinsic motivation. When you remove the need for any external motivators, like, getting payment, wanting approval, what is the stuff that you do because it almost has to come out of you? It's, following your curiosity, following your interest. And when you're doing those things, it's totally because you're being in alignment with your true self. And what I found that the cool thing is that doesn't have to just exist in the workplace, that you can actually show up with intrinsic motivation and really get clear. I've done some of the exercises. In fact, one of the ones I'd love to offer, the audience, anybody listening to this, is that your best possible self. And what I have my clients do is write it from the perspective of the 3 roles that are most important in their life. So I've written it as a business owner, as a husband, and as a dad. And not necessarily those aren't the order that those exist in.
Right.
But it's amazing. So I have absolute clarity. Hey, I know I'm being my best possible self as a husband when I'm in alignment, with being this type of person. And this is how I want Abby, my wife, to feel. And when I know she feels prioritized, she feels like she can talk to me and I'm open to hearing, I'm accountable, those things, then I know I'm hitting the mark, right? And I know what her core values are. So I know how to make sure, spending a few minutes affirming her core values gives me all kinds of leeway, right? To, because I'm going to make mistakes. So right. I certainly do. But it's going to have the biggest value in return, right? And so when I'm affirming her values, it's amazing to see how that makes her feel special and loved and important. And so, and same thing as a dad. And it really creates a vision. It's amazing from a self-correction standpoint how quick it is for me. The other day, my son was upset because of something my daughter did, one of their many sibling arguments. Yes. So I went down to go, try and console him. And I think it was, some crackers in my hand. I tried to offer to him and he was still upset. So he kind of smacked my hand and the crackers went flying everywhere, and there was a moment there where I was like going to send him to his room and probably not say, the most instructive, loving thing I could have said. But, because I have written out with such clarity and I go and read my best possible self, at least once a month, and oftentimes I do it each week, I was able to have just that split second to recognize, hey, here's an opportunity to be in alignment. And so I was able to, tell him, hey, I love you, bud. And I know you're hurting. And I can see from your reaction as you're looking at me that you didn't that you didn't feel good about your choice right there. And I said, if I can give you a hug and give you a moment to just kind of collect yourself. And there was a teaching moment, I think as our role as parents, if, from my perspective, is really as kind of like a teacher and a coach to help develop their character. I think it's the most fundamental, important aspect. And you better believe that my kids have values vision boards. They know my kids are 6 and 4, by the way. So So hopefully they don't resent me later for this, but they talk about their character strengths as being their true superpowers. I love my daughter's got a picture of a superpower version of herself that she drew, and all of her superpowers are character strengths, right? So it's kindness and compassion as opposed to the ability to fly, because I genuinely believe that our character strengths are the closest thing that we have to real human superpowers, right? If you look at amazing people in history like Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mother Teresa, really what they did is express their character strengths with such radical clarity and a commitment to something bigger than themselves. And it gave them, something I think very close to human superpowers.
I think it's very insightful. I like that a lot. In the CEO Global program that I get the opportunity to teach with some of these graduate students at the university, we talk about the character as being the one thing that's actually in our control. A lot of other things are out of our control. That's the one thing we can always control. Circumstances, regardless, we can always control what our character is if we invest in it the right way with integrity. So I think it's super powerful to look at that as the superpower, because it is. Hey, we've got just another minute here. I want to make sure you mentioned a giveaway for our audience. So I want to, if you don't mind sharing that, I want to make sure then we give just a plug for your authentic growth mindset as well.
Absolutely. So the worksheet that I'm going to make available to you is definitely one of the exercises, one of the many exercises that shows up in the course. And it's called Your Best Possible Self. And it basically walks you through. This is a positive psychology kind of exercise that I've tweaked in a way that I found to be uniquely powerful. And they've replicated this number of times. And what they see, the results that come out of that, and what I've seen is that it's like basically setting goals, but they're goals you have control over, which I love what you just said there about character. We know that self-control and feeling like, you're taking action on things to control is a key factor in being happy and living, your best life. And so your best possible self is like setting your true north, and then doing it in the roles that are most important to you, so that you're not just showing up, giving your best energy at work or, outside of the places that maybe are really where you want to show up to be your best self. And so, and the other thing that people get out of this is it really helps to increase your amount of time in that flow experience. So flow is kind of like when you're in the zone where you feel so engaged in the work you're doing that you almost lose a sense of time and your sense of satisfaction. And there's like a perfect match between your abilities and you're being stretched just a little bit so that you find it incredibly like gratifying and rewarding. And it also lines up with your sense of purpose. And so, and the way I have you do this exercise is helping you to achieve flow, not just in whatever your work might be, but also showing up in your core relationships. Because one thing that we didn't really get a chance to cover that is an important aspect of this course is that once you really get clear on your authentic identity, from that point, it's about creating authentic community and connection. And so, and you can't really create the type of connection that lifts everybody up until you're starting with authentic leadership. And once you do that, it's about committing to like creating a virtuous, culture of your virtuous family, so that, maybe those virtues are love, kindness, and forgiveness. I do this stuff with my families all the time. I know over the summer, I had a few families that created specific points of emphasis. That was like, I think, fun, creativity, and I think character. I think the three things were, and they oriented their entire summer around activities and books they would read. And the buy-in they got from their kids was amazing. The kids were making suggestions. Dad, Mom, we could do this. And they said it was undeniably the most fulfilling and purposeful summer they'd ever had. And it carried over into the school year where the kids are like, hey, these are the character strengths I want to really work on this year. And the kids are showing initiative and showing up with more intentionality, and like they're getting better results than they ever had. And I know we talked a little bit about not being motivated by money earlier. Now, I did want to just really briefly cover that. I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with money and profit. Obviously, it's one of the most fundamental aspects of being a successful business. The only caveat that I say is I really encourage people to be clear on why that is so important to them, so that they're not being motivated specifically by money, but by what money allows them to do. Is it, building a bigger platform to change the world? Is it to be the best provider they can be, for their family? And I think when you do it that way, I think that's where you don't get caught in the trap of, being solely focused on the outcome of money, which we know isn't going to give you the life that you think it will.
Right.
So
that's powerful. Thank you for that giveaway. We'll make sure that we have a link in our show notes, and then we'll also share that here as well. Dr. Andy Garrett, thank you so much. Again, your complete blueprint to establish an authentic growth mindset. Give us just one more minute about this specifically, this online digital master course. Just kind of quickly walk us through a couple of examples of the modules and how it can be used for your family as well.
Perfect. Love it, Derek. So, this really is a complete step-by-step process. So it walks you through from the beginning, understanding, having people even just go through the initial process of really understanding, what their authentic self is and describing that is a very powerful process. I really, really believe it's the closest thing that we have to an actual best version of ourselves. And so you go through that process. And then there's 2 evaluations that help you to really get clear on your core values. And then there's specific exercises that help you to make sure that you internalize those values so that they really are becoming your compass. When you have clear values, you become a confident decision maker. It's amazing how clear it is on, how to make decisions going forward and how easy it is to put boundaries around things that used to suck up your energy and time that really aren't, moving the needle forward. So you go through that whole process. I know one of the simple exercises in there is just writing about your values for 10 minutes. And, the research is showing that just doing this one simple exercise it might be the most effective psychological intervention that's ever been studied. And I can leave a quote from Stanford professor Kelly McGonigal that highlights all the benefits you get for just spending 10 minutes doing this. But of course, you have to understand your core values first. So, and if you can think for a moment that that's the most effective psychological intervention that's ever been studied, and then add that there's about 20 more exercises on there that have almost as equally compelling research supporting it, I am so humbled but happy and proud of what we put together. And I really believe that if parents and business leaders are willing to go through this and willing to go through this with their families, I believe it's the legacy I want to leave behind, and it's the key to really moving the trajectory. So you got the module on core values, then you do the module on intrinsic motivation. So you figure out what your passion is, how to show up in a way that each day, that life becomes energizing. It's not about showing up to work. It's like I get to go do the most meaningful work every day. I get to spend time with my family in a way that is totally rejuvenating. Not to say it's like that 100% of the time, but true authentic exemplars, you'll see they have incredible energy because they're just infused, they're inspired by showing up every day with a sense of purpose. So the next module is to figure out your character strengths and to how to use those, and then how to identify character strengths in the team you want to create, whether that's your employees or if it's with your kids, and how to make a commitment to creating a virtuous organization, which is clearly been established where you're going to get your greatest results from your employees. It's actually going to increase the bottom line, and it's going to make an environment that's really fun to go work at so that you're going to attract the top talent, you're going to retain employees, they're going to want to stick. The loyalty you're going to get from them is phenomenal. So, and then from there, once you've got those 3 elements of authenticity lined up, that's where the blueprint comes in. Then it's about creating principles, that clearly come from these, that create the infrastructure and scaffolding. As I use the word blueprint, because without a blueprint, you might have a vision for like a house you want to build. You might have great tools. You might have great team. But if you don't have a blueprint, you're going to be greatly wasting those resources, right? You're not sure how to use them effectively. And so when you've got a really, really clear vision and blueprint, now you're able to really see the picture you're aiming for, and you're able to utilize your resources, team, and strengths in the most powerful, efficient way possible. And so we lay out, here's the foundation, here's the scaffolding, and then here's how to really create. There's a legacy exercise that you do where you write your own eulogy. And I actually include the part of the eulogy that I wrote for my grandpa that, shows, hey, when you live a life this way, that people will show up and say these types of things about you. And I've written my own eulogy from, my kid's perspective, my wife's perspective, the impact. And when you talk about reverse engineering, it's the most powerful reverse engineering exercise you can do. It's the ultimate endpoint. And so when you really say, hey, this is the life I want to live. So if that's how I want to live, what do I need to start doing now to make sure that I'm building, the life and I'm creating the life that will allow people to say these types of things about me and the impact that I have on them. So.
So powerful. I know there's much more too. And to our listeners, as you can hear the passion and devotion to building this project from Dr. Andy. Yes, there's a cost to this product, of course. I would hope there is. But the point for him is this really is, I believe, a legacy piece for him as really coming together with a calling to put this together. And that's been the whole point of this. I've gotten to see him build it and put it together for the past year now. And it really is about getting this message out because he's seen life change. He's experienced life change personally. He's seen these values passed down. He's seen it happen with his clients. clients. So again, Dr. Andy, thank you so much. And we appreciate your time today and look forward to going through this master course.
Derek, I had so much fun having this conversation with you. I could do this all day long.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care. We look forward to seeing the next great things that you're doing too.
Perfect. Likewise.
Right.
Thanks, Derek.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.